All right. So it's a beautiful day here in the Northeast. So I figured I would, I just got to one of my favorite parks. So I figured I would sit down and make a sort of a laid back video. Not really, no script or notes or anything. Just kind of wanted to chat if you're interested in listening to what I have to say. You know, one of the most interesting parts about the spiritual awakening path is realizing that almost everything is created by your mind. And I mean literally everything. All of our problems, all of our fears, all of our desires, our wants, the things that we avoid, and so on. It's all just products of our own mental impressions and our thoughts and our ego. It all stems from some past experience in life, something that we've been through either in childhood maybe, or maybe we were conditioned to believe that we need to fear these things, that we need to desire these things. But you come to find that all of these things, it's just thought. Like literally everything is just thought. That's the point of this video. Let me just cut to the chase. Even like our ideas about ourselves, even all of the things that we don't like about ourselves, everything that we think we need to change, even so much, I mean, if you want to get really deep, even the idea that we are a person is literally just a thought in our head. Because how would you know that you're a person if you haven't grown up around other people and someone, gave you a name and you have this whole identity? You kind of figure out for yourself, oh, I must also be a person like all these people. But that's just a thought. If you were raised, for example, let's say you were born to a human mother and then handed off, as soon as you were born, you were handed off to a pack of gorillas. And this is very hypothetical, but you were handed off to a pack of gorillas and they loved you and cared for you and raised you appropriately. I don't know if that would happen, but let's just say it did. You wouldn't know that you're a person. You wouldn't have a name. You wouldn't understand. You wouldn't understand things like money, all of the things that humans do. You wouldn't know about any of that. You wouldn't really probably understand love, and you would probably grow up mentally deficient. I'm not saying you wouldn't, but you wouldn't have an understanding of all the, you probably wouldn't be scared. You wouldn't be scared to live in the jungle by yourself. You know, all the things that humans fear, but you still would be a human in a body, but you wouldn't conceptually understand or know this. And I know this is a bit of an extreme example, but it kind of brings me to my next point, is that all of our problems, everything that we deem as negative or positive, it's all just our mind deciding this. External events, everything that happens outside of us is inherently neutral. So something happens, our eyes see it, our ears hear it, and then our mind kind of makes a decision. It's like, is this good or is this bad? And then once it kind of, almost like our ego works almost like a computer. So it sort of processes this and then it makes a decision whether it's good or bad. And then it, presents certain emotions to us. And depending on what we've been through in the past, that's how our mind is going to decide, is this thing good or bad? But external events are inherently neutral. It's really about how you frame things. So you can look at something like getting let go from your job, for example. Somebody had to tell you that information. You had to hear it from somebody, and then your mind had to make the decision, oh no, this is bad because I have to support my kids and I have all these other obligations and I can't lose my job right now. This is terrible, terrible news. But the truth is, it's just an event that happened. It's just something in the external world that happened. And we think that things are necessarily happening to us, but they're just sort of happening and we kind of decide whether they're good or bad. So even in that case, for example, I'm not saying that in a practical sense that is probably not a great thing to happen. I'm speaking strictly in a very absolute sense here. And we're only interested in truth on this channel. I don't like to sugarcoat things. And if we're speaking from the perspective of truth, nothing external is necessarily bad. So even in the case of losing your job, maybe you lost your job and then maybe, I'm sure this has happened to many people in the world, they lose their job and then they get a much better one, or they get another opportunity that they love, or maybe it pushes them to pursue something that they're more passionate about, like starting a business or something like that. And maybe they had to go through some struggles, but eventually they got there. But maybe that wouldn't have happened if they just stayed in the job that their regular, maybe it was just a job that they didn't really care for that much. You can pretty much frame anything like this. You can frame getting broken up with like this. Maybe you got broken up with, maybe you broke up with somebody, you were in some sort of terrible situation, and maybe it led you to find someone a lot better. So this brings up the question, like, then what are we actually? Like, if everything is just thought, we obviously can't be these thoughts because they're constantly changing, they're constantly coming and going. Thoughts are never our true nature. They're never who we actually are. Our thoughts are only contingent on, like I said, our past experiences. They're contingent on the things that we see. We can think certain things. For example, you could see your spouse or your significant other out in public with another person, and you can instantly jump to the conclusion that they're cheating on you. And you get all upset and you get all of these emotions, and then you go approach them and they tell you, oh, this is my cousin from out of town or something like that. Extreme example, but again, I'm just trying to show you how much our mind really dictates everything that we feel, everything that we think. We identify so much and we attach ourselves so much to the thoughts that we have. And we need to let go of this. And it takes time. It takes a lot of time. And so what we actually are, I know I'm jumping around a little bit. So what we actually are is the silence in between the thoughts. We're just the awareness that sits behind the thinking. The thoughts come and they go, but there's something that's always there. And that's our consciousness. And that's what we need to practice. That's what meditation is. It's just holding that consciousness, holding that awareness for a longer amount of time. And to the point where you're always just living from this place of consciousness. And you kind of get to a point where you choose what you want to think about. You no longer have all of these intrusive thoughts, kind of just ruminating thoughts, just kind of coming up when you don't want them. You're always in this sort of conscious awareness. And when you need to think about something, you do. Don't misconstrue this as you just, like I'm telling you, just shut up and stop thinking about everything. A lot of people, I think, get that twisted. That's not what you're supposed to do. You're kind of just supposed to detach yourself from the thoughts so much. And the more that you get into these states of meditation, the more that you, or not even meditate, but the more that you just practice pulling yourself away from thinking so much and just learn to focus on just the here and the now. I mean, this is what like Eckhart Tolle says a lot. If you've ever read The Power of Now, or if you've read like The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, they kind of all point to this. Everything points to this. This is what all spirituality and not really modern day religion, but originally what religion taught is that your own awareness, your own consciousness is what life is all about. That's what happiness is. That's what fulfillment is. It's never really found in anything external. It's obviously not found in things like money and sex. I think we know that. But it's also like, you can go as far as to say it can't even be found in things like anything circumstantial, like being in a good relationship or having a career or some sort of passion that you spend all of your time doing, because even with that stuff, people still find themselves miserable and depressed and getting stuck in the mind. And then if they lose those things because their happiness was contingent on this relationship or this job or whatever it is. But when you lose those things, what happens? You're no longer happy. That's one of the things you have to wake up to. I think that's one of the things I've woken up to, is that happiness, whatever that word means, it's more about letting go of everything as opposed to gaining things. It's about literally being able to just sit like here in this moment, in like just letting your mind be silent and just enjoying life. That's your responsibility. That's your only thing you need to worry about, is to just exist and enjoy life. Now, obviously, this is a challenging thing to master, and this is why most people who have truly mastered this are old, enlightened sages and not young people like me. I'm still getting there. I think a lot of us are still getting there. And it's also important to note that, you have to have your life set up in a certain way so that you can actually do this, because if you're living in a war zone or going through some, terrible, you're getting abused every day or something like that, or living in some toxic environment where you could still do this, because like I said, all external events are actually neutral, but it's going to be very challenging. And this is why it's encouraged for you to really spend a lot of time alone when you're getting started on the spiritual path, to really be able to sit in consciousness and be able to sit in awareness And I have to spend most of my time alone. I have to come to places like this, or else if I'm just constantly caught up in worldly life every day and have to deal with all the people at work, and if I lived with a bunch of people or a bunch of children or something like that, I wouldn't really be able to devote time to this. Like I said, you can, but it's going to be very challenging. And for most of us, when we're just getting started on this path, to really learn to silence the mind, to silence the ego, it's not going to be like an easy thing to do. It's you have to understand your mind has been conditioned through the years, through 15, 20, 30 years, however old you are. And really learning to let go of that and learning to let go of thinking all of the time is not something that's going to happen overnight. This is not asking you to believe in anything crazy. This isn't asking you to believe in a God. It's not asking you to do anything special. It's asking you to just turn your perception a little bit. It's asking you to just turn your mind away from thought and to only just focus on whatever is happening in the present moment. That's it. You can be from any religion, whatever. It doesn't matter. This is for everybody. This is not, you don't have to do anything special. This can't really be argued with or disproven, because what else could you possibly be? I already proved to you that you can't be thoughts because they're constantly changing. You can't be your emotions because they're constantly changing. The idea of I'm a person in a body is just a thought. It's just a concept in your mind. Let's say, for instance, you were born in a way where you could never look down. Like, let's say you could only ever see like here, and you couldn't just, for whatever reason, you couldn't see your body, and no one told you that you have a body. I mean, you could make assumptions considering the fact that you see other people, but you wouldn't really know. You know what I mean? Your only consciousness is my point. Your only conscious awareness. You're only that silence that sits behind the thoughts. So I said this in a video a couple weeks ago, like if you were to just sit here and just turn the mind off, like just don't think about anything, just observe everything around you without judging it, without labeling it, without thinking of color, without thinking of anything. Just turn the mind off and just look around. That's everything. That's all that you are. You're just that awareness. Even if you just do it for a couple of seconds, 3 to 5 seconds. I'm just looking at this tree right now, but I'm not thinking about anything. I'm not conceptualizing the tree. I'm letting go of all concepts when I look at the tree. I don't know that it's a tree. I don't know anything about it. I don't know that it's brown because I'm not thinking about it. I'm just literally looking at it in a state of observation. And that's life. Like, that's how we're supposed to live life, through that conscious awareness. And yeah, occasionally we're going to have to use our mind when it's necessary. But typically I'm always kind of in this state when I'm not actively engaged in something. And things just sort of, you'll come to realize too, when you silence the mind, like you intuitively just start doing things. Like everything just comes more natural to you. When you're not thinking about everything, you're not trying to conceptualize, you're not trying to judge, have opinions about everything. When you just let that all go, you're just, your body, you just know what to do in most situations, and you don't have to think about it. It's really weird. It's really crazy. There's a lot that goes into this. And it's one of those things that's only going to make sense through practical experience. So my advice would be to start a practical mindfulness meditation routine, 5 to 10 minutes every day of just sitting and observing. And the thoughts will come up, and just pull your mind back to the present moment. It happens. It's just the nature of how this goes. And when the thoughts do come up, bring yourself back to whatever here is now. So if you're focusing on your breath, just bring yourself back to your breath. If you're focusing on if I'm focusing on this tree, I'm only going to observe this tree for whatever length of time. And that's it. And the mind is going to go crazy. It's going to race. It's going to make you think. It's going to make you think you're bored and frustrated. But you have to be willing to pull yourself away from that. And don't use this principle as to think that you should just sweep all of your problems under the rug, and that, well, if I just don't think about anything, then it'll all go away. No, that's not the point here. You still deal with everything. In fact, I've noticed lately, if I want to procrastinate on something, I think like, oh, I have to do that. And then my mind just go, oh, but you can do it later. If I just pull myself away from that thought entirely and just go straight to the thing, I'll just do it, and I won't even think about it. Procrastination, anxiety, fear, all of that, that's all products of the mind. You'll live in complete, as the sages say, you live in imperishable bliss when the mind starts silencing itself. And you don't have to believe me with any of this, but it's just to get you to start thinking for yourself and just consider what I'm saying. You'll start to see, just recognize your thoughts, recognize how silly they are and how ridiculous most of them are. And they don't ever lead you to any real happiness. Most of the time, they just bring you to pain.